Coordinating events for VTubers sounds like a business opportunity. No, you will make no money. Don't think about it. I keep getting messages from people being like, I really want to get into management. Should I do this? Should I do that? And I'm like, hey, you won't make money. Don't do it. But yeah, you won't make money. It's no one's fault. It's just the same as like the esports thing. It's like saying I want to manage an esports team. Okay, when you're like, oh, I want to try managing a VTuber or VTuber group. No, you don't. I promise you, you will either lose money, make nothing, or make peanuts that you can't live off of. So yeah, don't think of it like that. Even the event stuff, there's so many companies that do events that spin up for things like this for creators, and then they go under. And all of the really good creators tend to just do their own stuff as a sole proprietor now, instead of having their companies to do these things, because you just can't sustain it. Even if you do make great money with a couple events, you can't guarantee that it'll always work out and keep people salaried. And then people are like, hey, I need to make money to live, so I can't just work here and hope money comes through. You know what I mean? It just ends up not working out. Yeah, there's off-brand that organize events and stuff, but they went under. Exactly. An off-brand was made by like Ludwig, and it was huge. It was the one to go to, and they went under, you know? So I can guarantee, you know, a lot of VTubers that have a lot of staff that do things, whatever, I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of those people just don't get paid, or they don't get paid enough, or they're getting propped up by something that won't last forever, you know? There are also a lot of people that do it for free for them. And then I always think it's an issue whenever you have staff members that do things for you for free. I think that's a bad thing. It's nice to get help from people, but when you treat them like an employee, they're expected to do an employee's amount of stuff, but they're not employed by you. It's a bad situation. Never goes well. So yeah. Not very good. It's different from like a mod stepping up and helping a little more, but when they want to go like full managing your brand, I don't know. Those dynamics always end badly. Yeah, and it's no one's fault really. It's just like the scenario is set up in a way that it can't end well when it's like that, you know? So I don't know. That's why there are so few companies that have ever done well. Even esports companies, there's so few of them that are still like huge. A lot of them had their renaissance. They had their time, their year that they were huge, and then after that it just kind of petered out. And a lot of the brands still technically exist, but they're not really doing much. They're just kind of like a Twitter account, you know? That's how it usually goes. Toast is very transparent with his esports stuff too. Yeah, and if someone like with the size of community that Toast has can't make an esports team that will make a lot of money, then you know it's just not doable. I mean, you see how many of them go under. But yeah, same thing with all content creation groups and everything. They all just kind of do themselves. And the ones, I gotta say, a lot of stuff looks really professional on the outside, so you think it's like this huge organization doing all this, but it's usually just like some streamers doing it, and they hire like a designer to occasionally help them with posting stuff, and they have like one manager, one producer, and that is like the most you should have. That's the most you could pay for. And that's what like content groups that are like big, you know. I don't know. Is part of the issue that people just have less free time and free money to spend compared to 3 to 4 years ago, or something more fundamental? No, it's fundamental. It's how the business works and how much money does not pass through. People think a lot more money passes through than it does. It does not. A lot of people that look like they have big followings and look super famous or whatever don't make that much money. They make enough to live slightly better than like perfect middle class. That's it. A person who is living a very normal average life does not have the money to fund 2 other people working for them full time. That doesn't exist. You know, you have to be a patrician. You have to be like making a lot for that to work. And even then, when you're like, oh, I want to make a content group, or I want to make an esports team, and I want to bring up these people that don't have existing huge brands, I don't want to put them in that and have them grow, you're essentially just doing charity. You have to be willing to burn and lose all that money, which is what a lot of people do with esports stuff. You know, like, yeah, Toast talks about his, and Moist Esports, right? Charlie talks about his stuff too, how it's basically just losing him money, but he just wanted to do it. And that's why it's working, because he just wanted to do it, and he's okay with that. But yeah, that's just how it goes. So yeah, so if you're sitting around and you're like, I want to get into this thing as a career, or that thing, when it comes to content stuff, no, it's not a good idea. You know, I don't want anyone to like look at it and think it makes a lot of money when it really does not. Because people see something like they got this sponsorship and they got $200,000 for it, and they're like, wow, that's a lot of money. But then when you have a bunch of players living in a house, and then you also have like 3 managers and 2 coaches, that money goes real quick, and not everyone gets that much of that, you know? Think about what you need per year to live if you're trying to like have an apartment that's a normal size. Like it just that amount of money burns up real quick, you know? So I think a lot of people have a really different impression of how much money actually gets passed to people. Every additional staff member you have is an additional mouth to feed, because these people, again, are like not looking to do this for free. They're like trying to do this as a job. So, you know, it's rough. Charlie's players also keep 100% of the prize pool. Yeah, exactly. They don't take a cut of that. Anytime a company like doesn't take a cut of everything, you know they're losing money. And like whatever they're doing during that time is cool while it's there, but it's not going to last. It's going to shrink down. It's going to have to, like it's just not sustainable. That's why you see a lot of esports teams have a good like year or two, and they're so popular and they're so famous, and they have all these bits of media going out. Their YouTube channels popping, they have their jerseys, they've got their merch store opening, oh they're winning, oh look at all the people on their team, they got all these coaches, it's so cool. And then you just like don't hear about them too much after that. They just kind of slow down on posting. They still exist, but they slow down. It's because they ran out of whatever money they had initially, and then they had to pare down and go quiet with it. And usually it's just like, it's like owner/coach that's left, and like one editor or something who's like part-time, and then the players who often leave the content house and start streaming a lot on their own to make money, and then they just live in like their own little apartments with a roommate. Like that's how it usually goes, So how close are these companies to breaking even? They're usually very far in the negative, typically, or they close it all down before it gets to that point. Oftentimes it's like the individuals are in the negative for it, but not the whole company, because the company basically takes off the burden. So the company will stop paying out staff. Instead, it's more like, hey, the individuals, if you want to have hours with this manager, you can pay for it. And that's usually how they do it. So the entity, the company, stops owing money to anyone, but like the individuals still do if they want to keep up with that stuff. Like if they want to keep paying that editor, now they pay it themselves instead of the company, stuff like that. That's usually how they like wind down. They slowly stop paying for things for their players or for their talents. Same with like a lot of them are also content. I think like TSM, right? Like a lot of those types of companies, they were an esports team, but then they also started picking up creators. And what they usually do is they do signing bonuses for people, and they like pay for stuff for them in the beginning. So they have editors, they have a team, they have management. And then after that first year, if they don't like make a ton of money off of them, which they almost never do, they're like, okay, we gave you your year of stuff to help you grow. We can't afford to anymore. No, you could stay with the brand. We'll help you where we can here and there. But there you go. And then there's like nothing that you really get from them. They just exist. And for some people, depending on how they monetize, that's okay. For some people, they end up losing money that way. So like, that's why a lot of people, some will stay, but a lot will leave those kinds of orgs over time. So I think what a lot of big esports teams are doing now is just making content. Yeah, it's really just like the owner barely living off of what the company makes, barely. And then they like part-time hire an editor. Sometimes it's just the talents under those companies pay for it. It's the same thing apply for VTuber agencies. VTuber doesn't take that big of a cut of anything, yet still has staff and stuff. There's a lot that I can't comment on with that. There's a lot legally that I can't say with that. I'll say in general, yeah, it's the same type of setup. So like if you start not making money, then your choices are cut staff or go find money somewhere, which means either ask for more from the people that are with your brand, or you like try to go for an investment or something, or something like that. It's the same as esports, but yeah, every staff member you have is another mouth to feed in any company, especially if they're full-time or you're paying for like a lot of part-time hours or whatever. If you're paying them well and not wages, then it's a big cost, and that has to come from somewhere. So most orgs, what they do for content for esports, whatever, is they start with an investment. So usually they do really well for that first year or two, not because they're monetizing well, they're actually like hemorrhaging money, but because someone paid them and gave them a chunk of money, and then they use that to hire in a bunch of staff to keep their team going to tournaments or whatever it is, or content house, all those sorts of things. And they set those people up, and they set the company up with a structure, and they have a bunch of staff and a bunch of players or content creators or whatever it is, right? And they usually do like 1 or 2 years that are great, because the investment money is what's paying for people's salaries. And then at some point that money does not exist. They've drained that account, and they're making some money, but they're not always positive. If they are in the positive, if they're not as in the positive as they were to match the amount of investment money they had, then usually they have to just cut staff down or go under or whatever. Or they start, like I said, they start asking for more. So I know one friend who was on an esports team. When they were first picked up by the team, they were offered a spot in a content house that they didn't have to pay for. It was covered by their investment money. And then they were offered like free paid hotel and travel for every single tournament they went to, and a small salary for like food and just to live, right? And then when their company ran out of the investment money, it wasn't the company being evil or anything. It was just literally, hey, we have no money, so we need to pivot. Here are the options if we want to stay afloat. They cut staff down, so they only had 2 people. They said the content house, because it was rented, it wasn't owned, they said, you guys have to split the rent. The management will also live there and split the rent with you, so the split is low, but you will have to cover it. There's no longer a pile of money to pay for it. Someone has to cover it for this house to exist. So they all had to start paying a little bit of rent, and then they had to pay for their own travel and hotel to go to their events to compete. So if they didn't win, they lost money. And it just was the scenario where they were like, hey, unless we're like big streamers, which they weren't, they were like, we can't This is like literally not doable. And yeah, they basically all had to like quit and go live at home with parents or go live with roommates where it's like a better situation for them instead of a big house. And they would still compete. They'd still do their scrims and there was still a team. But then what they would do is they would try to take like as individuals, not as a team, sponsorships from companies like Razer or like whatever, like those sites, LG sponsored one of them once, to try and get them to sponsor them just to cover their expenses for traveling out to their events. So instead of being like, hey, Razer, give me $2K a month for this or whatever, instead it was like they would get sponsored, and then in return, anytime they had travel expenses related to going out to a tournament or something, they would just send that bill and they would get reimbursed by that company. And that was how a lot of them were able to do it in the future and like be okay, not be like in the negative. But it's rough, man, because there's just no money in the industry. There's enough for some creators to do all right, and those creators will do all right. There will be a few creators that do really well, but overall, most people, not so much. And certainly not enough to hire a lot of people. Like for my own staff that I pay for, I've got an editing team, but they're not like all full-time or anything like that. So I have like editing fees that I pay out each time I ask someone to do a thing. I have Bark, who does get paid a bit more because he's full content manager, and he helps me with so much. He doesn't just do like editing for my YouTube. We'll also be like, oh, I'm debuting this outfit. And he sits there with me and comes up with, hey, let's do this for a teaser. He came in so clutch for the sock puppet stuff. All of that was him, by the way. So shout out to him. All of that was him. And it was just, he was great. He did so much work. But yeah, I don't know. It's like there's not really much else that one can afford.